Trump gets real on immigration. The left explodes. Let's check it out. Welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. No stranger to controversy, of course. As expected, the left has erupted over Trump's comments about Somalian refugees at the end of Tuesday's cabinet meeting, which ended with a bang. And today, Trump went even harder at Somalian refugee fraud, of which there is so much in the state of Minnesota, and at the America-hating Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Take a listen.
Look at their nation. Look how bad their nation is. It's not even a nation. It's just people walking around killing each other. They've taken billions and billions of dollars. They have a representative, Ilhan Omar, who they say married her brother. That's a fraud. The Somalians should be out of here. They've destroyed our country. And all they do is complain, complain, complain. All she does is complain about this country. And without this country, she would not be in very good shape. She probably wouldn't be alive right now.
We've brought in a refugee that became a congresswoman, and all she wants to do is dismantle the nation that rescued her from Somalia. He has a point there. And this is some of the most pointed language that we have ever heard from the president on immigration, broadly labeled racist throughout every medium that you can imagine. An allegation that is effectively meaningless, though, today, as it is so overused. More important than whether Trump was mean to the 100,000 Somalian refugees living in Minnesota, largely on the dole, is the broader point that he is making, giving the American people a dose of reality that is typically very much concealed by political correctness. You never really hear these kinds of stories about what the reality of all this immigration is doing to your country. They conceal this very well at the government level because they have an agenda, and it's not your agenda. Let's replay Trump's initial comments from yesterday. We're going to go from there.
The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. Our country's at a tipping point. We're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. But when they come from hell and they complain and do nothing but we don't want them in our country.
A lot of people agree with that. Why are you coming here, rescued by this country, and telling us we need to fundamentally change our country when you get here? And you're elected by mostly people from your country, other refugees from your country, as Ilhan Omar is. So let's take the billion in fraud stolen by these Somalian scammers, and we're going to set that aside for a moment, even though that's a really big story. We're going to set that aside. We're going to look at an even larger problem, which is the real problem here, which is that we have a major demographic of refugees imported into our country using antiquated refugee policies that were created long before this country began transitioning into what it is now, a hyper-wealthy first world welfare state. Long before blue states like Minnesota started adopting Scandinavian socialist policies and just handing money out as fast as they can to anybody that needs some, is when we got these refugee policies 75 years ago, including massive welfare programs. In the state of Minnesota, local governments in the state spent $22 billion on public welfare in 2022. 30% of the budget went to public welfare, and they went to import refugees from Africa. In 2023, Minnesota spent nearly $46,000 on welfare per person in poverty, the fastest growing category in Minnesota's budget. And they want to import non-English speaking refugees from Africa? Anybody with a functioning brain can understand that you cannot import tens of thousands of non-English speaking refugees into a state and then just sign them up for various welfare and entitlement programs. Everybody gets that. No matter how left and crazy you are, you can understand that. This is just dollars and cents. Trump says 88% of Somali refugees are on at least one welfare program. And today, amid all the screams of racism, and I think we heard from every single person in the state of Minnesota today that got in front of a camera, at least at the government level, Not one challenged that number from Trump. Nobody challenged it because it's true. And they're on the road to fiscal suicide. It's very obvious. But Democrats in Minneapolis would never admit that because those Somali refugees are now largely naturalized citizens. Most of them are voting. Yes, they might not speak English, but they get to vote. And they become one of the most powerful voting blocs in the state of Minnesota, which is why the mayor of Minneapolis, an effeminate white guy, is suddenly fluent in Somali.
That's not American. That's not what we are about. And we're going to do right by every single person in our cities. And so to our Somali community, Daman Shabka, Somalied Kunul, Minnesota, Garahan, Minneapolis, Waan, Kuji, Janila Hai, we love you. We stand with you.
They've adopted 100,000 people, most of them on the dole, contributing nowhere near as much as they take. A lot of fraud in that group as well. We love you so much. Why? Because without them, that guy on the screen can't get reelected. Can't get reelected. And he has to find a whole new career for the rest of his life. Can we just be honest and say how ridiculous it was that he just spoke the Somali language at the end of a press conference in the United States? How ridiculous that is, that level of pandering, how pathetic that looks. All day today, we were told by politically correct liberals that Somalians are the backbone of the Minneapolis community. Here's the Hennepin County attorney.
There are no roving gangs of Somalis targeting or harassing or doing anything inappropriate to any community members. Our office at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office here will not assist in any way, shape, or form in any of these ICE raids. Our Somali community members are what makes Minneapolis one of the finest places in the world to live.
The Somali community members that all stay in their own neighborhood on the southeast side of town, don't assimilate, don't talk to anybody, don't learn the language, and just perpetually take from the government are what make Minneapolis, Minneapolis, and Minnesota, Minnesota. How could we survive without them? What is the value in diversity if it brings absolutely no other value? What inherent value is there to adopting needy refugees from around the world, of which there are billions, by the way, if they're not going to come here and assimilate and contribute? What's the value of that? Nobody has an answer. All we ever hear is diversity. Because again, this is a voting bloc that controls her job. The importation of this brand of refugee is undoubtedly the stupidest possible immigration decision that this country makes. Look at our friends in Europe, a rapidly collapsing continent, a culture also disappearing before our very eyes. Ilhan Omar responding to Trump today.
He's always been a racist, a bigot, a xenophobic, and Islamophobic. We know that he called African nations a hole in his first administration. He said he was going to stop Muslim immigration into this country. And so it is not surprising that he is going after black immigrants. Most of us are citizens. On our passport, it says we are nationals of this country. We love that Minnesota has welcomed us.
You thought she was going to say, we love this country? No, I'm not going to say that. We love that Minnesota has welcomed us. She almost said she loves the country, but she's not going to say that because Ilhan Omar hates this country. So very clearly. How many times has she had to tell us that over the years? How many sound bites have we played on this show showing us exactly who Ilhan Omar is? She believes the United States, the country that rescued her, needs radical, fundamental change. She hates this version of the United States. She's hated this country her entire life, but when she needed somewhere to run to, where'd she go? Not another nation in Africa. It is a racist country founded by white supremacists, they tell us. In Ilhan Omar's eyes, this is just a huge pile of wealth that needs to be captured and redistributed around the world. She loathes the United States and came all the way over here to become a congresswoman just to scold us on how awful we are. Try doing that in any other country, by the way. A refugee to congresswoman? Quite impressive for such a terrible place, right? And the vast majority of the refugees in Minneapolis agree with Ilhan Omar. They are a voting bloc that sticks together, and they vote Democrat. They vote for Ilhan and Democrats in every election, and if you don't support any of this, you are a bigot.
Trump's immigration policy is a white nationalist agenda. It's part of a white nationalist agenda. The idea is to make America white again. There's a belief that social cohesion isn't possible if you have immigration from all of these different groups. Why are we stomaching or tolerating this from the President of the United States? This is blatant racist language. At the heart of it, I think, is this clear idea that America has to remain a white republic.
Okay. First off, on social cohesion, he's right. We do believe it's not possible at Biden levels of immigration, because it's not. Not because anyone's racist, just because it's common sense. We've been importing the entire world at a rapid clip. We brought in 15, 20 million people in just a few years. Nobody thinks that's sustainable. It was the biggest treasonous scam we've ever seen, what they tried to do. They tried to control elections perpetually in the future and win forever by just importing a new voter base to wash you out. Our blue cities and states, all in on it, run by idiots, filled the pockets of those people with cash. They bought out entire hotels to hold them. It was the most psychotic behavior many of us have ever seen. Migrant hotels was a very common phrase here in New York City. They were all over the place. Oh, that's a migrant hotel. The city just bought out a hotel and filled it with people from South and Central America and Africa and the Middle East. Suicidal behavior. They tell us there's some intrinsic value in diversity alone. Diversity is fine. If everybody wants to come here, assimilate, and create, and produce, give more than they take, go for it. That's not the system anymore. We're long past that. They pretend we have endless amounts of money to just import and adopt the world. Should we start sending container ships to India and Africa, Camp of the Saints, importing the third world by the hundreds of thousands every day? Why not? Diversity is our strength. Let's just bring the whole world in. They're the backbone of our communities. It's the most ridiculous nonsense imaginable, and it's being spewed by nearly every state leader in Minnesota today. A reminder that we are led by pure incompetence. Dana Loesch, nationally syndicated radio host, joins us tonight. Dana, good to have you. 30% of Minnesota's budget spent on welfare. They just rolled out another program, 12 weeks of paid family leave or medical leave. You can just say, I want to take care of my grandma, and you can get 12, maybe as much as 20 weeks of paid leave from the state. And with that, they want to import the rest of the world. I suspect that anybody could see how ridiculous this is.
It's, as you said, it's completely unsustainable. And the amount of fraud that has taken place, over $1 billion. And just so everyone knows, it's actually probably going to exceed that. That's just the estimation of how much taxpayer money has been funneled in through this and wasted. That's just what they're, and that's also, I should add, just in Minnesota. It came out that Maine is dealing with the exact same thing with Maine Cares, the state's Medicaid there, where it was discovered that a Somali national was bilking the state out of millions, tens of millions of dollars in a similar fashion. So this is probably more nationally widespread than ever thought, but they kept it really well under wraps in Minnesota because you have a governor who was very vengeful and who threatened and had retribution for these whistleblowers who had no other recourse except to go on social media on an account and tell the world about what was happening. So I think it's great that we're having House oversight get involved in this. I think it's great that the Treasury is investigating and the FBI. And I'll point out, you know, Rob, you were playing all of these sound bites of people saying that it's racist to note and observe this crime that's being committed. Of the convictions so far, all but 2 were actually Somali nationals in Minnesota. And of the 86 that are charged, 78 of them are Somali nationals. And they're all part of this diaspora that's been brought in. I mean, it's shameful. So instead of attacking the people who are calling this out, they should be trying to help the taxpayer.
You know, it's going to turn into a race thing, and the president today, you know, he had some words, and you knew it was going to become like this. But I want to play this from a guy named Wajahat Ali, a New York Times contributor, the son of Pakistani immigrants to this country, somebody that should be very grateful to be here and not in Pakistan. Here's what he thinks of the country that he lives in. Take a listen.
You have lost. You lost. The mistake that you made is you let us in the first place. Then we have kids, a bunch of kids. And then guess what? some white women, you know, the Western civilization women, the pure women, the American women, quote unquote, the Rust Belt women, the real women, they like some of us brown folks. We don't take them. They come to us. We're embedded. We are everywhere. You are losers. Your story is a story filled with misery. It's filled with bland chicken. It's filled with terrible, terrible dry meat. Your music sucks. All your culture sucks.
I notice he's not in Pakistan when he says all of this, right?
That sounds racist. It sounds pretty racist to me. You know, when I hear those remarks, he's the one who's obsessed with race and racial animus. I mean, the people who are pointing out, by the way, those taxpayers affected are also brown people in Minnesota. Taxpayers in Maine, also brown individuals. All across the United States of America, because federal money went into these programs in Minnesota, also brown individuals. But I guess that's just not convenient for him to mention in his race-baiting diatribe. That's shameful. And if the New York Times had any kind of self-awareness or integrity, they would let this person go. It's not about cancellation. You know, it's FAFO. If you want to talk like this and you want to push division and racial bigotry, by all means you can, but everybody else can sit here and point it out. And if the New York Times is fine having that under their masthead, that says quite a lot about the old gray lady.
Yeah. You could go back to Pakistan if you hate it so much.
Also that, if he hates the nation so much. The nation that afforded him a paycheck and a byline.
The nation that sucks so much that he just won't leave. Little Wajahat Ali from the New York Times. Dana Loesch, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right, Senator Ted Cruz joins us now tonight from the Capitol. Good to have you on, sir. 50% of Somali visas are fraudulent in Minnesota. That information just dropped yesterday at the cabinet meeting. It's a spectacular number. I guess my first question is, are these visas actually going to be revoked? Is something actually going to get done about this?
Well, look, I certainly hope so, and any visa that is fraudulent should be revoked. If you look at what has happened in Minnesota, there has been massive fraud to the tune of billions of dollars bilking the Minnesota taxpayers. Much of that has gone to fraudulent individuals in the Somali community who've been sending that money back to Somalia, and just came out recently, the single largest funder of al-Shabaab, a radical Islamic terrorist group in Somalia, is the taxpayers of Minnesota through fraudulent money that was stolen from the taxpayers. And I got to say, the person in charge of it is Democrat Tim Walz. It is an absolute scandal, but it indicates exactly the kind of bankrupt policies that today's Democrat Party keeps pushing forward.
You know, I heard today from so many different local officials in Minneapolis and in the state of Minnesota that Somalians are the backbone of the community there. The vast majority of these people, according to the White House, are on some form of welfare. Nobody refuted that claim, by the way, today at all, which tells you it likely is very true. There's almost zero assimilation. This is not the immigration of yesterday in this country anymore. We're bringing in liabilities into the country that are costing us a fortune, and it's done for political reasons, I believe, and it's decimating our bottom line. It's decimating our culture. And when asked about it, we hear that they're the backbone of our community without being given any reason why they are.
Yeah, look, those are empty Democrat talking points. If you look at the elected representatives, you've got Ilhan Omar, who is viciously anti-American, a radical leftist. You look up in Dearborn, Michigan, where you've got Rashida Tlaib. Same thing. You know, last year you had an entire mob in Dearborn, Michigan, chanting "Death to America." And Rashida Tlaib refused to condemn that. Ilhan Omar has been at rallies where people are proclaiming their loyalty to Somalia and proclaiming it over the United States of America. And that is dangerous. And those are both examples of radicals who favor open borders, who favor releasing criminals from jail, who are rabidly anti-Semitic, who are Marxists and hate free enterprise and capitalism, and who hate your rights and my rights. And it is dangerous. And I'll tell you, Rob, the frightening thing is that is no longer the fringe of the Democrat Party today. Those radicals are the heart of the Democrat Party. They're driving their agenda. You look in New York City at Comrade Mandami, a communist and an Islamist, and that right now is where all the energy is in the Democrat Party, and that is tragic and it's dangerous.
Certainly is. I want to switch and I want to talk about SNAP here for a second. Another big topic these days. The New York governor, Kathy Hochul, has refused, one of many governors, to refuse to release the names of those receiving SNAP in her state here in New York. There is so much fraud and so much is stolen from this. They don't want to release these names. Here's how she defended that decision today.
What they're saying in Washington is we just want the rolls of people that are on public assistance. You've been resistant about that. Several states have, by the way, more than 20. Why not just say, okay, here are the names of the recipients?
Let me tell you what's going on here. We actually went to court about this because people sign up for a particular program, not to have their name in a, think about, do you really want every bit of information about you in other parts of the government monitoring you?
That's not an answer. That's somebody pretending to care about privacy issues when in reality she's mortified of what will happen to her political party if we throw the millions of fraudulent welfare junkies off of the hind teat, which of course is their source of power. How many people can they get onto SNAP? How many people can they get onto support?
Well, Rob, I'm going to say something that's going to surprise you, which is actually I agree with Kathy Hochul, but in a way that perhaps she didn't intend, which is if she doesn't want to release the list of who in New York is getting SNAP benefits, that's great. The federal taxpayer shouldn't pay for it. She can burden New York taxpayers with as many fraudulent cheats as she wants, but if she won't give the names, why the hell does she want money from the federal government and she won't even tell them the names of who's receiving it? And it's because the Democrat Party, in an organized and systematic manner, supports fraud. We were talking about Minnesota a minute ago. 2 days ago, the Minnesota Government Employees Union put out a long statement on Twitter saying Tim Walz is 100% responsible for this multi-billion-dollar theft and fraud. I'll tell you, you look at something like Obamacare, there are 24 million Americans right now on the Obamacare exchanges. The estimates are 6 million of those are fraudulent. They're just bilking the taxpayers, and there's not a single Democrat in the Senate willing to do a thing about it. So if Kathy Hochul wants to embrace and defend fraudsters, knock yourself out. But I think the Trump administration should say you're not getting a penny of federal money until you produce that list.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That's exactly right. I got 30 seconds left. I saw you at the White House today. Trump terminating Biden's corporate average fuel economy standards, the CAFE standards they call them, lowering the standards so automakers can sell more gas-powered vehicles, making new cars cheaper. Why was this so important?
Look, this is a big deal. It's going to lower the cost of cars by thousands of dollars, lower the cost of trucks by thousands of dollars. I authored the legislation in the Senate in the one big beautiful bill that zeroed out these CAFE standards. And as a result, you're going to be able to get the car you want. It's your choice. You're also going to get safer cars because Biden's CAFE standards made automakers replace steel with plastic, which meant in accidents a lot more Americans died. And so what the president did today and what Congress did is going to save Americans' lives, and it's going to make cars and trucks a lot less expensive.
Love to hear it. Senator Ted Cruz, good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Qatar becomes a new possible home for Venezuela's dictator as Trump continues to apply tremendous amounts of pressure on Maduro to flee, get out. Next, why this brand of regime change is so vastly different from our feeble attempts in the Middle East. Stay tuned.
Federal agencies urge every family to have an emergency radio. During any disaster, electrical power may get cut. The emergency radio gives you the vital information you need. Newsmax wants you to have the Dynamo Emergency Band Radio. It doesn't need batteries and works in any emergencies. It retails for $30. You can get it with the free offer. Call or go online and get the emergency radio today. Your life may depend on it.
They killed her brother. They shot her dog. And they took her hostage for 400 days and terrifying nights. They raped her. They put guns to her head. They starved her. These are the stories of Israeli women attacked by Hamas. If you are supporting Hamas and radicalized Palestinians, this is what you are supporting. Choose freedom, not terror.
You know the holidays are meant to be about family, laughter, and taking things slow. But when you're in pain, it's hard to enjoy any of it. I know because my back has made life difficult. But that's why I love the Signal Relief Patch. It's helped me enjoy the holidays again. Join the thousands who have experienced relief and get 30% off your Signal Relief Patch today. I've given this patch as a gift to friends, family, and even strangers I've seen in pain.
Signal Relief has truly given me my happiness back.
The Signal Relief Patch puts pain on the back burner.
The Signal Relief Patch has been life-changing.
This is too good to be true. It's too easy.
In a recent study, over 85% of people felt relief, and it comes with a money-back guarantee. This patch was a game changer for me, and it can be for you too. Trust me, the patch works.
I want those boats taken out. And if we have to, we'll attack on land also, just like we attack on sea. We're going to start doing those strikes on land too. You know, the land is much easier. We're taking those son of a out.
Have you checked back with President Maduro? I mean, is your pressure campaign working? And do you think how's he responded to your demand that he leave the country?
It's not pressure campaign. It's much beyond that, I think. But I spoke to him briefly, just told him a couple of things. We'll see what happens with that.
All right, so the pressure campaign on Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro continues. Clearly, the Trump White House wants to rid that oil-rich nation, which is just a short flight to our south, of a communist dictator that has strong ties to places like China and Russia. Last week, Congressman Carlos Jimenez on this show, congressman from Miami, predicted Maduro will not last much longer. Take a listen. If you had to lay a bet on it, is Maduro still there summer of next year, or is he gone?
If I had to bet, you forced me to?
Yeah.
I think he's gone.
Yeah. So the word regime change gives a lot of people in the MAGA base PTSD. It's not popular at all. It's a brand of foreign policy that's always been widely mocked by the president himself. But that's now changing, according to Politico, with a post here, an article here. Regime change is back. MAGA is getting comfortable with it, pointing out that Trump built his America First movement in part on the promise of keeping the U.S. out of foreign entanglements. But some view this, what's happening in Venezuela, as much different than Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, places like that, because it is in our backyard. And one of those people is Alex Gray, who served as National Security Council Chief of Staff and Deputy Assistant to the President in his first term. Alex, good to have you on. Give us your perspective for those at home that are very apprehensive and say, why the hell do I care who's running Venezuela? What do you say back?
Well, I think you should care, and you should care because this is the cornerstone of traditional American foreign policy for 2 centuries. What happens in our hemisphere directly impacts the security and the safety of the American people here at home. And the president, I think what makes this an America First foreign policy, Rob, is the president is defining Venezuela the way presidents would traditionally have done before the end of the Cold War. And he's saying this is a direct threat to America's national security at home because the Maduro regime is sending drugs directly into the United States, killing Americans every single day, because the Chinese and Russians and the Iranians and even the North Koreans at certain points have had their tentacles into Venezuela, obviously the Cubans. Because of all those reasons, this is a very different sort of threat than one of these nation-building ideological crusades of the Bush era or the Obama era. This is entirely different, and I think it's actually a quintessential America First foreign policy agenda.
You know, I talked to Rand Paul at length about this yesterday, and he's on the opposite perspective as you. And I even pointed out that I think that with a country like Venezuela, I think it has a much more stable population. It's obviously it's not an Islamic state, which I think is a huge part of the problem of regime change in the Middle East. It's a country that had an election that clearly the majority of the people want a different government and would welcome, the majority of the people would welcome the government that's in hiding right now, Maria Machado. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you oust this man, if you oust Maduro, that we're not going to have huge problems inside of that country, and that you could turn it in. I mean, you could have a refugee crisis coming out of Venezuela that screws up South America. Is that a concern?
Well, I think anytime you're talking about military action of any sort, there are a lot of unknowns. There's lots of side effects, which is why the president has always been extraordinarily careful about the use of force. But Rob, I think one of the things that most observers miss about President Trump, and it's an important distinction, is he has always felt, and his actions have shown this, that military force can be necessary if it is targeted, if it is in limited scope and duration, and if it is in pursuit of very clear, defined U.S. national interests. I would say core national interests. And I think preventing a Chinese outpost, a Cuban outpost on the South American continent, and preventing essentially a narco regime from continuing to kill Americans throughout our country every single day, I think that's a core national interest in a way that promoting democracy in Iraq and Afghanistan never was, and in a way Barack Obama's disastrous Libya operation never was.
Yeah.
So to me, this is a very different sort of situation.
And finally, just before I let you go, you obviously well connected in Washington. Do you think it happens? Is it Qatar that Maduro goes to? That's the latest country that people seem to be talking about. What's your prediction as to whether or not Maduro is still there in a few months?
I think he probably wants to go to Cuba. I think he probably, if he had his druthers, he would probably end up in Havana. I think the Trump administration is wise to try and keep him out of the hemisphere entirely. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up playing video games with Bashar Assad in Moscow, or ends up, ends up somewhere far away from our hemisphere.
But you think he goes? You think he's out?
I think whether it's a week from now or 6 months from now, I don't think Nicolas Maduro is going to be running Venezuela much longer.
Okay. All right. Alex Gray, we appreciate you coming on. Good to see you.
Thanks, Rob.
All right. The obsession, the ridiculous obsession after the last 4 years with President Trump's health. Up next.
Maybe he's so old that he fell asleep in an afternoon meeting, or maybe he just closed his eyes to better concentrate on filling his adult diaper.
People always ask, why Patriot Gold Group? With over 10,000 clients to date and over $1 billion in transactions, not a single complaint on the Better Business Bureau. Consumer Affairs top rated for 9 years in a row. Over 2,000 5-star reviews. The only company nationwide where you, the client, work directly with an owner. Home of the no fee for life IRA. Gold is up 80% in the last 28 months, 275% since Lehman Brothers collapsed. We are patriots protecting patriots. Give Patriot Gold Group a call at 888-528-4290 before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer 9 years in a row. Call now, 888-528-4290.
It's the Blue Compass RV annual Blue Tag clearance. Save over 40% on select new RVs during our largest sale of the year. Plus, every RV comes with a 1-year VIP membership to RV Complete, a $5,000 value. Visit us online or in store today.
For 250 years, brave servicemen and women have been stepping forward to defend the freedoms America stands for. At Wounded Warrior Project, it's our honor to serve this generation of injured veterans.
I'd do it all over again, but people need to know freedom isn't free.
I am proud to have served for 20 years of this 250 years. It's just the screams, the smells, the vivid images. It's like a recording in my head, and I can still hear those screams.
It's crucial for our veterans to get the benefits they deserve. Please join Wounded Warrior Project. With a gift of just $19 a month, you will provide free programs and services that can change a person's life forever.
When you almost lose your son, and to see him the way it is today, so thankful.
Call or go online with your gift of $19 a month, and we'll send you this limited edition blanket honoring the 250th anniversary of American independence and freedom.
In 250 years, a lot of good people gave their life for this country.
My daughter, she gave up her health for this flag.
For veterans, rock bottom is not a pretty sight. There were plenty of days where I just didn't want to go on, and in walked Wounded Warrior Project. My goodness, 250 years, it's humbling, and all the donations that people give is so important.
He represents all the soldiers. They still need help. Thank you, he says.
Please give a little to those who gave so much for us.
President Trump today, once again, defending his health and stamina. Several instances where the president appeared to doze off during that lengthy cabinet meeting.
It's clear that there's age-related cognitive decline.
But he's aging terribly for a president.
Maybe he's so old that he fell asleep in an afternoon meeting, or maybe he just closed his eyes to better concentrate on filling his adult diaper.
Oh, these people suck. It's comical at this point how they obsess over this president's health, alleging that he dozed off during his cabinet meeting yesterday, which, you know, maybe he even did. Let's put it this way. When I was in college, I would doze off in class after getting 9 hours of sleep in 2 seconds. I can take a nap right now. I put my head down, I can take a nap. Anybody can fall asleep. Anybody can get bored in a cabinet meeting. Let's say the president closed his eyes for 15, 30 seconds in the middle of a 3-hour cabinet meeting while he's running the entire country, sleeping 3-4 hours a night, tweeting until midnight. Is that the greatest crime? After we had a corpse for the last 4 years running the country that we never even saw? Here was the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent tearing into the New York Times over this appropriately. Take a listen.
You had what was one of the greatest scandals of all time, that the coverage of the Biden administration, Joe Biden's diminished capacity, and the cover-up.
And that's why it's probably fair to raise these questions.
Where was the New York Times? We just had a 3-hour cabinet meeting yesterday, Andrew. For 10 months, the Biden administration did not have a cabinet meeting. I hear from people in the Treasury building that I see President Trump more in a day than my predecessor saw Joe Biden in half a year.
Kari Lake joins us tonight. You know, it's funny because I said this last night. I was annoyed yesterday by how much Trump was on television because we're trying to put a show together. And when Trump's talking, you got to listen. I got to listen to it. So it's like, damn, he's still going? Like, I can't do this any longer. I got to write this show because we got a show every night. And with that, they go to concerns about the president's mental capabilities after he talked for 5 hours, most of it ad lib.
His, mental capacity, his stamina. Are you kidding me? When they were mum about the fumbling, bumbling, mumbling, stumbling Joe Biden who couldn't walk across the sidewalk and find the front door to get into the White House, when they were requiring an auto pen to sign things because who knows what he was doing, they didn't talk at all about that. But we have a guy who is really, you look up the word stamina in the dictionary, you're going to see a picture of President Trump. I was just at the White House the other day. I was talking to some reporters there. These are young reporters in their late 20s and early 30s, and they are exhausted covering President Trump because it's a nonstop, 12 hours a day, travel schedule that you can't believe.
Oh, it's absurd.
He's incredible.
Last
time I saw him, the first thing I said is, "My God, you look amazing. Yeah, you look like $1 million."
And I'm half his age, and if you put me in a staff meeting for 3 hours and you give me a cheeseburger, I will fall asleep faster than a baby. I mean, and does that mean I'm not equipped? I don't have the stamina to run the country at 42 years old? I don't think that's what it means.
There's a lot of meetings I wish I could sleep in, and I bet he was just closing his eyes going, oh boy, when's this going to end? Or what's this person saying? Who knows?
It's the longest meetings.
Literally, Joe Biden slept half the day away. He wasn't even present. He called the lid at 11 a.m.
You never saw him. Yeah.
Insane.
You never saw the guy. Kari Lake, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
That's funny. All right, debating whether the U.S. should continue importing third world refugees with Jill Biden's former press secretary, Michael LaRosa. Coming up next.
Think of all the places that could expose you to identity theft and financial loss.
It only takes one mistake at your bank, hospital, or employer for a criminal to gain access to your personal information. And if they do, you and your money are at risk.
I thought I'd be the last person on earth this would happen to.
It was devastating. $110,000 of my hard-earned money gone.
1 in 3 U.S. consumers have been a victim of identity theft. Are you willing to risk your financial future? With LifeLock, if your identity is compromised, we'll step in and fix it so you don't have to. Guaranteed. Our dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialists handle your case from start to finish. They contact institutions on your behalf, dispute fraudulent charges, close compromised accounts, and even procure legal support, far beyond the capabilities of your bank or credit card company.
The bank didn't help me. The police department didn't help me. It was LifeLock who had my back on all this.
It was handled and taken care of. I didn't have to do anything.
In fact, we're so confident that restoration is guaranteed. Plus, LifeLock offers the $1 Million Protection Package with reimbursement up to $1 million for stolen funds, experts and lawyers, and out-of-pocket expenses, up to $3 million in total.
When I opened my mail and I had a check from LifeLock, I just started crying. They made me whole.
Act now to save 35% off an annual plan for your first year. Your membership includes identity monitoring and alerts, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist, and the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package. Don't face identity theft alone. Protect your future and finances with LifeLock, the leader in identity theft protection. Call 1-800-649-0629 or visit lifelock.com/35save to save 35% on your first year. Call 1-800-649-0629.
At Pure Talk, life is simple, and so are the deals. For instance, an unlimited wireless plan means unlimited savings for life. Not for the life of your phone, for your life. Unlimited talk, text, and data on a crazy fast 5G network for $29.95 a month for the rest of your life. Honestly, there's never been another deal like it. In fact, you might say it's the deal of your lifetime. Pure Talk, everything you need, nothing you don't.
Ageless Male is a best-selling brand in male enhancement. Our Rapid Nitric Oxide Booster, our performance-boosting Wonder Pill, and our best-selling formula for boosting your total testosterone. Ageless Male. Be the man you want to be.
Radical jihadists are not done. Iran promises death to America. They've built sleeper terror cells in the U.S. They support terror groups out to destroy Israel, including Hamas, whose founding charter calls for Islam to dominate the world.
The young people have been educated to believe that the most sacred thing they do is stab a Christian in the heart.
The only democracy in the Middle East that supports religious freedom is Israel. Standing for freedom, not terror.
Welcome back. ICE operations have been confirmed in the state of Minnesota, targeting Somali illegals after the Trump administration ended their temporary protected status. There's also claims from Kristi Noem at DHS that 50% have fraudulent visas, a spectacular number. Those on the left, of course, are furious over this move and the president's words these past couple days. But does the president have a point more broadly about immigration and who we're letting into this country? We're going to debate that now with Michael LaRosa, Jill Biden's former press secretary and a special assistant to former President Biden. Michael, good to have you on tonight. Let's forget the fraud story, which is a big deal in my opinion. Let's just talk more broadly about refugees into this country who aren't assimilating, who are consuming our welfare resources in a state like Minnesota, which gives away a lot of welfare. Why should these people continue to come into this country?
Well, first of all, refugees are the most screened and most vetted group of people coming into the country versus tourists or students or temporary workers. So it doesn't really make much sense to put a freeze on the most screened while leaving the sort of less screened untouched. It's more theater than it is policy. It doesn't really solve the security problem that you're referring to.
I'm not referring to a security problem. I'm talking more about just a fiscal issue of importing needy people from another country that are going to take from our system that's designed for people that have put into the system.
Right, but I think one of the studies out there, I think from the Cato Institute, says that 21% less excuse me, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. But the number of people consuming social welfare programs, or immigrants, let's call them immigrants.
Yeah.
Immigrants consuming welfare programs is 21% less than American-born people consuming welfare programs.
Well, and we can.
So again, I don't.
Yeah, if you broadly go across all immigrant status, that may be the case. But let's single out. Let's talk about Somalians because that's where we're at right now, and that's the big story today, right? The president said yesterday 88% of this population of Somali refugees in Minnesota are on some kind of welfare. And what I didn't notice today was anybody in that state, and everybody in that state government said something today, none of them refuted that number. Which is, I mean, if we are importing, I mean, does it make any sense to import people from another land that come to our country and almost all need some kind of welfare while contributing not much to our society? I mean, that is the road to disaster, is it not?
Well, I guess, are we importing or are we complying with the U.S. refugee settlement laws that have been, on the books for decades? So, I mean, are you talking about sort of amending laws or restricting laws? I mean, again, I don't know if that's going to solve the problem that you're speaking to either from a security or economic standpoint.
But you can understand why that's not sustainable? That's, you can't. I mean, here it's as simple as this: you can't have a welfare state, which the United States has become, and also open borders. And refugee laws were written in the late 1940s. This was not a welfare state back then. I mean, Minnesota didn't give away $40,000 or $50,000 in freebies every year to anybody that asked for them back in the 1940s.
No, in totality, we're at peak refugees right now. You're right. The last time it was at peak was in the 80s under Reagan during a huge refugee crisis from the Soviet breakdown. So it ebbs and flows, as does immigration. We talked about illegal immigration. Obama was at peak in 2014, I think, at 487,000. And Donald Trump hit peak by doubling that in 2019. And we, of course, doubled that under the Biden administration. So, like I said, these things fluctuate, but there really hasn't been an answer to the problem. And look, I think the biggest problem is executive actions. While I don't disagree that we should apply heavier vetting, but this will never change if you can't pass a law. We're still operating under the 1986 immigration law. Executive actions, by just doing that, it's not going to solve the problem. You have to you have to work. And by the way, the Republicans have two houses of Congress and the presidency. No better time to change the law than now.
Yeah. Michael LaRosa, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see you. Scott Bessent with a pretty great response when asked about a new movie coming out. Next in News from the Left.
PCmatic's Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals are going on now. For a limited time, when you buy PCmatic Antivirus, you get PCmatic VPN for free. Protect up to 5 devices with our easy-to-use American-made security. You get award-winning antivirus, lightning-fast VPN for total privacy, plus limited US-based phone support. Get industry-leading protection that's built by Americans to protect America. Don't wait. Visit PCmatic.com now before it's too late.
This message is for everyone on Medicare. Right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period, and some people may be worried if their Medicare benefits will be impacted by changes coming in 2026. So we are encouraging everyone on Medicare to call and check up on their Medicare plan and benefits. The call and Medicare checkup are free. Did you know that Medicare plans change every year, and some plans may even be discontinued next year? Call the number on your screen now for your free Medicare coverage checkup. We will check to see if there are any changes to your plan in the coming year, or see if there is a Medicare Advantage plan now available in your area with additional benefits or potential cost savings. Don't wait. Call to speak with a licensed insurance agent before the annual enrollment period deadline, December 7th. You can call now even if you called before. The call and 2026 Medicare coverage checkup are free. So call now for your free, no obligation Medicare benefits review.
Just call 800-248-5014. 800-248-5014.
This message is for everyone on Medicare. Right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period, and some people may be worried if their Medicare benefits will be impacted by changes coming in 2026. So we are encouraging everyone on Medicare to call and check up on their Medicare plan and benefits. The call and Medicare checkup are free. Did you know that Medicare plans change every year, and some plans may even be discontinued next year? Call the number on your screen now for your free Medicare coverage checkup. We will check to see if there are any changes to your plan in the coming year, or see if there is a Medicare Advantage plan now available in your area with additional benefits or potential cost savings. Don't wait. Call to speak with a licensed insurance agent before the annual enrollment period deadline, December 7th. You can call now even if you called before. The call and 2026 Medicare coverage checkup are free. So call now for your free, no obligation Medicare benefits review.
Just call 800-248-5014. 800-248-5014.
What are phytonutrients? They are naturally occurring plant nutrients that give fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers their vibrant colors, unique flavors, and distinct aromas. Balance of Nature supplements include 47 different ingredients of fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. It's an easy way to give your body more of a variety of phytonutrients that might be missing from your everyday diet. Get a free variety snack pack when you purchase your first set as a new preferred customer. This is your last chance.
Welcome back. Time now for news from the left. Former MSNBC host Crystal Ball on the podcast with Jennifer Welch, also known as the Crypt Keeper, condemning anybody that's not white who works for immigration and custom enforcement in this country. Take a listen to this.
Not only do you have no moral compass, and how many times have you seen these guys? They've got their masks on, so you can't see their whole face. But what you can see, it's like a brown skin tone and a dude who looks like his last name is probably like Lopez or Hernandez or something. It's like, what is wrong with you? Not only do you not have morality, apparently you don't have self-preservation.
Apparently you don't have a brain. This is it's not a racial thing that a country should actually have borders and know who lives in the country and control the borders of that country. And all of us, no matter what color we are, if we want to preserve the nation that we have here and we want to stop the destruction of it, especially fiscally, as we're learning with Minnesota, we're going to have to figure out who all's in the country and who should be here and who shouldn't be here. And there's got nothing to do with race. Again, these young ladies on these podcasts, not a brain among them. And finally, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent getting asked if it's appropriate for the president to ask Larry Ellison to make a new film, a new Rush Hour film. This is the thing that cracked me up last week, because Trump's out there basically just telling people, hey, I love these movies. You should make another one of those, because he wants to see it. The response to this was actually quite funny. Take a listen.
There is news in the past week that he has greenlit a film called Rush Hour 4 because the president effectively suggested or said, this is one of my favorite films and I want to do this for bread. What do you think of that?
Not much. I don't know. Is the Obama's contract with Netflix, is that appropriate?
Good point there. And again, the fact that Trump's just calling up movie studios and saying, hey, Rush Hour was a great movie. You should make another one of those because I want to see it. That just for some reason cracks me up. All right, we're going to end the night tonight, coming up after the break, with a really fantastic story about this 88-year-old veteran. You're going to love it. That's next.
Closed captioning is brought to you by MagnaLife Pain Relieving Foot Cream to target neuropathy symptoms.
The stabbing, burning pain in your feet is real. Here's what real customers have to say about MagnaLife Pain Relieving Foot Cream, the only thing that works for my diabetic neuropathy.
Available in foot care and diabetic aisles.
Sonobello helped me get back my sparkle this season.
This year, look amazing in every holiday photo with Sonobello, America's #1 cosmetic surgery specialist.
Before I would hide in the back of photographs, I didn't expect the results to be this good. I'm so happy about it.
This holiday, save 50% on the area you're most excited to change. Tummy, waist, arms, thighs, you choose.
I got lipo done on my stomach and also on my arms as well. Best decision ever.
Sonobello permanently removes stubborn fat, tightens and tones skin, all in just one visit with less downtime.
All the fat was gone. When I saw myself in the dress, I knew I was about to live my best life.
Call 800-665-0288 to save 50% on your first area this holiday. Appointments are filling fast.
Run, do it.
Because if you can feel half of what I feel, totally worth it.
This is a limited time offer. Save 50% on your first area. Call Sono Bello today.
Your data is like a single domino. The moment it's stolen, it starts a chain reaction that puts the information that guards your assets at risk. 1 in 3 Americans have been a victim of identity theft. Are you willing to risk it?
When I saw zeros on that screen as my bank account balance, I went to immediate panic.
$21,000 just gone.
I opened my account and $30,000 is missing. Like $30,000. I have no idea what to do.
If your personal information is stolen, are you prepared to pick up the pieces alone? LifeLock is the leader in identity theft protection and restoration.
Once LifeLock got involved, everything changed.
With LifeLock, if your identity is stolen, they'll step in and fix it so you don't have to, guaranteed. Our highly trained U.S.-based restoration specialists contact institutions, dispute fraudulent charges, close compromised accounts, and even procure legal support far beyond the capabilities of your bank or credit card company.
LifeLock pursued this case further than I ever would have imagined.
If you call right now, you'll get LifeLock for just $9.99 a month for your first year. And as extra protection, all LifeLock memberships include the $1 Million Protection Package. Our members receive reimbursement for stolen funds and personal expenses, like lost wages, as well as coverage for lawyers and experts up to $3 million in total.
When the bank refused to reimburse my stolen money, the $1 Million Protection Package came through for me.
Our restoration guarantee and $1 Million Protection Package are included in all memberships with no additional fees.
I think it's natural to think that you can do this on your own. You can't. You need an expert in your corner.
Call 1-800-360-9220 and use promo code TV35 or go to lifelock.com/TV35 to join today.
Meet Andrew from the Zebra. Andrew lives and breathes insurance. Andrew stays up all night watching the Zebra find people's savings. You might think nobody could love insurance as much as Andrew, but at the Zebra, everybody's really into savings. The Zebra monitors your insurance and informs you of savings the moment we find it, so you never have to second-guess your policy or your price. Nobody does insurance like the Zebra. Find out how much you can save today.
And the show tonight with a nice little story here. Army veteran Ed Bombas, 88 years old, still works 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, a cashier at a grocery store in Michigan to get by at 88. He lost his pension 13 years ago. Video of his story has gone viral.
Retired from General Motors in '99. In 2012, they went bankrupt and they took my pension away from me. The thing that hurt me the most was my wife was real sick. And they, when they took the pension, they also took the health care coverage. I sold the house, sold the property I had, and we made it through. My wife died 7 years ago.
And that's something. Australian influencer named Samuel Weidenhofer posted this viral video tipping Bombas $400 before he opened up a GoFundMe account to help Ed reach retirement so he can get out of that grocery store at 88 years old and live the rest of his life more comfortably. That account, in just 2 days, has $1.4 million in it.
And growing.
And I'm going to throw a little in there as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to, too. You see that, and your heart just goes out to that guy and his story, and you think about something like that happening. Isn't that the whole point of a pension? You put into it so they can't just take it away?
Yeah, that's a great question for our friends over at General Motors. What happened to Ed's pension? I think that's a question that's going to be answered here in the next couple of days, I suspect, as this video is going very viral.
Yeah, as it should. Bless him. Rob, good to see you. Thank you.